Thank you, David. I'm uh, I'm glad I've heard that song enough times now that I don't cry every time I hear it. That's good because it's hard to talk when you're crying. At least it is for me. So thank you everybody who chose to be part of this spiritual community today. We know you have so many choices in this virtual world that we live in at the moment, and we're delighted you chose to spend part of your morning with us. We had a really good turnout for our virtual community envisioning Friday and Saturday that Pat talked about earlier, and a lot of very good ideas were presented. I'm going to mention some of them later in the talk, which is about commitment. The question I invite you to consider this morning, and it's a wicked question: what are you actually committed to? It wouldn't surprise me if your off the top of your head question answer is, well, it depends. One of the things that came up on Friday evening was a really strong desire to be meeting back in person as soon as practicable, or actually sooner. And one of the things we did Saturday morning was to look at a piece of a Sunday service that's as close to meeting in person as is happening right now. Actually, they weren't in person fully either, but the host, the practitioner, the music leader, and the Sunday speaker shared the same stage, just like we used to. And it made it look like they were in person, except not exactly. Everybody was wearing a mask and holding the microphone close to their face and speaking into the microphone through their mask. And no one was singing with the musician, the piano player, and the speakers were speaking behind clear plexiglass shields. The only other people in the room, in the sanctuary, were working the video camera and the lights and sound. They were recording just like us and broadcasting on YouTube and Facebook Live. I think they used a platform called StreamYard, which we've looked at, but it doesn't allow you to see each other. It just lets you see the, people in the front of the room. And we discarded that because it was important to the board and to the other members of the congregation that they get to see each other, just like for real. So I'll post a link to that YouTube video in the newsletter on Wednesday if you wish to look at it so you can see what it looks like to have people together, but not together with masks and shields and so on. And when you really want things to go back to the way they were, it's a little shocking to see something like that and to comprehend that we have a more interpersonal interaction with each other on Zoom than we can have right now in person. Here, at least, we can see people's smiling faces if our cameras are on. So, a couple of times each year on a Sunday, I take the opportunity to talk about the control that default thinking has on us if we don't commit to a different way of seeing the world. I talk about it in classes a lot because it's really one of the big ideas of science of mind teaching, and it's a way we have to recognize and deal with the world that we experience in front of our eyes, because we learn that we can manage our experience when we become more actively conscious of how we think and how we perceive, and we realize that we can choose differently. Default thinking is what everybody knows is true or what everybody believes. And if we don't constantly is the word here, take charge of our own thinking, we fall prey to what Henry David Thoreau called common hour thinking. What everybody knows, what everybody believes, what everybody experiences, unless they know they can take charge of their perception and their thoughts around it. Believing that you are a victim of your circumstances or of somebody else's, including the government, any sort of feeling sorry for yourself, any sort of helplessness, learned helplessness or practiced helplessness, or, oh my God, I can't solve it, helplessness, all play a really big role in default thinking. I really do and I really don't want to talk about why we're still having this experience with this virus. And I want to tie our awareness of our experiences back to one of our Declaration of Principles. These are statements that Dr. Ernest Holmes wrote in 1927 in response to a journalist's request. Science of Mind was getting off the ground, sort of, and he was talking to a journalist, and the journalist said, "Hey, what do you believe anyway?" And Holmes, if he were Southern, or actually the reporter, if he were Southern, would have said, "What do you all believe?" He wasn't, at least not so far as we know. But the answer, Holmes didn't have an answer to the question right away. He had to go home and sit down with himself and think about what are these shared beliefs that are part of this teaching, this philosophy called Science of Mind. This particular statement that I'm going to point out today causes no end of chaos in some circles because some people don't want to believe that it's true. Holmes wrote, "We believe in the control of conditions through the power of this mind." I totally 100% believe this statement is true. And I know there are others in this room who also believe this statement is true. 100%. If we're staring at this virus and we're looking at it and we're puzzled and we're wondering why we're all having this experience, we have to look at this statement. We believe in the control of conditions through the power of this mind and wonder what it is in our collective belief, what it is in our jointly held thought processes that have us all experiencing this virus. Boy, that's a basket of worms, right? Why are we still having this experience? And the people that are dying, my dad attended another funeral of somebody who died from the virus last week. And for the survivors, sometimes there are long-term health effects. And the controls and the virus and the availability and everything else. What's going on with that if we believe that we have control of our conditions? It's kind of a rhetorical question because the answer to it is collectively, we believe the virus exists. And collectively, we believe, collectively, meaning all of us, believe that it's harmful and sometimes fatal. Now, Holmes, when he was writing this, his treatise back in the 20s and 30s, he used an unfortunate phrase, race consciousness, to describe the beliefs held by the human race. When we get right down to it, what this means is that any idea that is held in the shared belief of the collective unconscious, the belief system of all of us, has power over us unless we have a clear enough grasp of our own conscious awareness to supersede, override, erase, or negate this. It sounds simple, right? We must have the continuous, intentional commitment to do this until it becomes our own default point of view. This is not something that happens easily because we have a lot of tread, we have a lot of baggage, we have a lot of experience that this collectively held thought is true. And to change our mind and to hold our mind on this point of we have control over conditions, to change our commitment to this belief that we have control over conditions, and to never doubt and never question and never vary from that takes a lot of work. So Holmes tells us how to do this over and over and over again throughout the Science of Mind text. From the Friday daily reading on page 185 in the Science of Mind text, he wrote, "To daily meditate on the perfect life and to daily embody the great ideal is the royal road to freedom and to the peace that passes all understanding, and is the happiness to the soul of humans. Let us learn to see as God does, with perfect vision. Let us see the good, the true, and believe them with our whole heart. Even though everyone we meet is filled with suffering and limitation appears on all sides." From yesterday's reading in the textbook, from the bottom of page 185 and the top of 186. The reason a human has difficulty in throwing off some weakness of character while still believing in spirit implicitly and having faith that they are going to overcome their limitation is because they have not induced the necessary images in mind. If they had, they would overcome their trouble. Thinking of their weaknesses keeps the image of the weaknesses, before them. We cannot be too insistent on this all important point. And then he switches to all caps, like he's yelling at us or something. We must turn away entirely from the condition. And then he goes on, page 186, paragraph 2. Never look at that which you do not wish to experience. No matter what the false condition may be, it must be refuted. The proper kind of denial is based on the recognition that in reality there is no limitation, for mind can easily make a planet or an acorn. Now, this is a tall order for humans. It's a tall order for us. And mostly, even we know better, and it's still a tall order for us. Most of us are not that consistently in charge of our beliefs, our thoughts, or our thinking practices and processes. Until we are, we get to deal with and experience what the mind of the collective human unconsciousness believes. Until we commit to taking a different position, a different point of view, and hold it with our will, which is not willpower, it's intention and focus and one single pointedness. We are stuck with common hour thinking. We are stuck with default thinking. We are stuck with what everybody believes. And most of us, to be honest, don't really want to work that hard. We don't want to be in charge of ourselves 100% of the time. Most of us have never learned how to change our beliefs without beating ourselves up for having them. And that's not useful or helpful either. So how do we change our beliefs and increase our control over our thoughts without becoming rigid and critical in our thinking about our way of thinking? Here's the clue. First, we pay attention to what we've been thinking. How do we know what we've been thinking? We see how it shows up in our world. That's the hardest part. Once we can see what's showing up in our world and connect the dots to how we see the world, how we think about the world, then we can decide that we want to have a different experience and start focusing our attention on that different experience. We commit to having a different experience. Yes, it's a slow process. Yes, we backslide. Yes, we get to do it again and again and again. And eventually we make a new groove. Eventually we start having our default thinking fall in the direction of our choice rather than the direction of what everybody else believes. So I circle back to the question from earlier this morning. What kind of life, what kind of experience are you actually committed to? We can commit to lying on our hammock in the shade with a cold drink and eating bonbons only if we removed every single thing from our consciousness that prohibits us from doing that happily, joyfully, or anything in our past that tells us we're not allowed to have that much fun or that much life in our life. There's also, and this is kind of a hook, there's also a collectively held belief that to be spiritual means you have to be poor and you have to suffer. You're not allowed to be joyful and happy and abundant. Every bit of that is garbage thinking. Every bit of it is, to use a very old word, balderdash. And it remains true, a guiding principle, in fact, for the individual who believes it. Most folks who show up around here desire to have, as Pat said this morning when she was reading the host script, a happier life, better health, or more abundant living. What's in the way of that desire? Mostly, it's our belief that we can't have that. And then we build up all these stories, all these experiences of our past that said we can't, that we're not allowed, that we're not good enough, or we haven't lived, you know, spiritually enough, or whatever. Or that people that are abundant are bad people. All of those are beliefs. And a lot of it's trash, a lot of it's garbage thinking. So I have great news. We don't actually have to have a commitment to remove every limiting belief we have. We could be at that the rest of our lives. We do have the option to pay attention to what happens in our life and watch. And when we think about what happens, we have a chance to notice how we veered into that common hour thinking. And as soon as we notice it, as soon as we pay attention and see that we've been following that common train of thought that says we can't or we shouldn't or we're not allowed to or nobody ever gets that, we get to stop and overwrite that bad programming. Yes, it's work. Yes, it's constant work. But eventually, we can move our default thinking to the place where we see and experience the world, our lives, through this, our divine selves, our natural, innate, intuitive, divine perceptions. Every single time we take a step in that direction, we increase our experience of freedom. What does this require? It's that ugly C word, commitment. Commitment to our spiritual practices, commitment to be honest with ourselves, commitment to not pretend something is true when it's not. So with respect to what our center, or the folks that showed up for our community envisioning Friday and Saturday, what did we imagine together that we would commit to exploring? We didn't say we'd succeed, but these were things we were willing to step into, willing to explore, willing to try, willing to practice. The synthesis of our highest vision, this was beautiful to me, was that our center was going to be vibrantly alive, even more than this year. It was going to be freedom itself. We were going to have fun, and we were going to practice engaging with nature, engaging with life as it is. And then we looked at a number of activities that we wanted to explore more or experience more, first on Zoom and then in person. I'm going to talk about the Zoom ones first. A few of these fabulous ideas have start dates. Most of them don't. And most of them don't have a whole lot of detail around them. But we have committed to begin. We've committed to start. One of the ideas, we used to have a sacred cinema, spiritual cinema, that would get together once a month to watch a movie together. That's not possible right now, but it is possible to have a movie discussion group once a month. And the idea is for individuals, a movie to be selected, and individuals to watch the movie and then virtually get together to talk about and to hear what other people think about what the movie meant to them. The second thing that we committed to explore was a 6-week home book study on Julia Cameron's The Prosperous Heart. 3 facilitators have already volunteered, and more are welcome. As Pat said this morning, we've committed to give it a try. First Sunday potluck on Zoom with breakout rooms so people actually have a chance to have conversations with other people, just like we used to do when we were in person at the Gregory in the dining hall. We're going to continue expanding our diversity of speakers on Sunday mornings and on other times. We've already planned on a Wednesday night speaker on racial inclusion and equity, probably in April, late April, after tax season is over. And we've got a handful of musicians that have been suggested as people that we could contact for potential Sunday services or maybe other musical events during the week. And then this, the continued practice of the morning practice and the classes with a variety of leaders. The world is our oyster and we get to open it. There are also a handful of things that we wish to explore in person, knowing that for a time we will be masked and socially distanced. It doesn't mean we can't do things together, though. Janet has committed to continuing the monthly full moon labyrinth walk up at Unity of Tucson. It's this week on Thursday, I think that's when the full moon is at 7:00. The details are in the newsletter. There was a new idea posed yesterday, which is, what if we did community field trips? Like going down to see the sandhill cranes in the lakes and pools and ponds that are near McNeil before they leave for the summer, or going up to the lavender fields in Oracle once they're in bloom, or perhaps touring Colossal Cave together, or seeing, walking, or hiking in the Chiricahuas. If you have other ideas for possible community adventures, please share them with your board members. You know who they are, or hopefully you know who they are. If not, they're listed in every single board agenda, board minutes that are posted on the website. We're also exploring the idea of meeting outside on a Sunday. We lose some things, like the recording, and including our out-of-town participants. And potentially we may gain some other things, like seeing each other in person. Even though we'll be masked and distanced, we'll still be able to make eye contact with our bangs. So I want to close by repeating the credo, the value statement that we created in the 2020 envisioning, which we decided would still serve us quite well in 2021. I'm going to read it now. CSLT inspires spiritual expression in community with all and offers an accepting, loving, peaceful way of living a joyful, healthier, and more abundant life. And I'm also going to read a tiny piece of the inauguration poem created and read by Youth National Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman that I'm sure is getting read everywhere this morning. She speaks of commitment. When the day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. So commit to the life you choose. Enact that. Don't think it's ever done. It's a process. We're always creating. Life is a process. Spiritual practice is a process. We're always creating ourselves anew and afresh every single day, every single time we take the time to pay attention and notice. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now I want to roll right into the prayer. So I'd ask you to hold in your mind some way you wish to have a more enlivened commitment to your spiritual practice. I want you to put that in your mind and hold that as a vision for yourself while I speak the words. I breathe into my awareness of this whole and holy presence, and I know that it lives in, as, and through, and all around, encompassing, surrounding, infilling, and unfolding in and each and through all. Each beloved on this call is part of that. Every individual who watches this video later is part of that. Each one has the continuous opportunity to stepping up to the greater yet to be, that greater experience of life, that wholeness, that power, that joy, that light, that delight, that freedom of expression, of enjoyment, of abundant good. So I claim for myself and for all an experience of this divinity, showing up as me, showing up as everyone. And even though there's a story in the collective consciousness that requires suffering or poverty or sadness or moping or whatever, I discredit that because it has no place, it has no power, it has no merit. That is an untruth. It does not belong in a world of light and life and love. So I cast my eyes upward and I see the great good. And I know that it lives in, as, and through me, and in, as, and through each and all as we step into that and we experience and explore it to a greater and greater extent. So I bless this awareness. I bless this opportunity and this practice and this ability to have a way to expand our reach, to expand our personal experience of joy and delight, to expand our interaction in the world with greater peace, love, and joy. So I celebrate this great good, and I celebrate each and every one who chooses, who commits to engaging in having that experience. Delightfully, gratefully, blessedly, I relax, allow, and let it be. And so it is.